Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. In this video, we are going to discuss raiding. Specifically, how to get into raiding. From an outsider's perspective, raiding offers a great challenge, and taking down some really well-designed bosses with a team of skilled players is a fantastic feeling, especially for the first time. But there's somewhat of a wall to get past in order to jump between doing mostly looking for raid content and progressing into normal, heroic, and mythic mode raiding. So, what can be done to break down that wall? How do you get into raiding? Well, the first thing that you're going to need to think about is that raiding is a responsibility. Yes, there are time investments in a lot of aspects of gaming, but raiding, rather critically, involves other people. Anywhere between 10 to 30 other players will be relying on you to certain degrees, and despite the fact that how much responsibility you take on changes depending upon what kind of raiding you're doing, the fact of the matter is that you're going to need to dedicate time to it. So, start by asking yourself this: do I have the time and energy to raid? What kind of schedule do you have? Do you find yourself with a reliable chunk of free time very often? Are you in school? Are you studying for exams? Do you have a very intense job? Do you have other people, like family members, relying on you? While it's perfectly possible to be a raider with loads of other responsibilities, the stress and drain of those other responsibilities could leave you with very little left to spend elsewhere. That's fine, just remember that raiding can and will be stressful to a certain degree, so take that into consideration. You don't want to burn out because of raiding. It's also important to note that raid teams will raid at different times, so even if you work a night shift or your free time is otherwise awkwardly placed, there are teams out there that can cater to you. The second thing you should ask yourself is, am I good enough to be a raider? Now, the answer to this is almost 100% yes. The fact that you're watching this video is indicative of one of the most important qualities a raider can have: wanting to improve. But before you get into raiding, you're going to need to learn your class to the point where you can play it without really thinking. This is called muscle memory, and learning your rotation by practicing on dungeons, world quests, and training dummies is a great idea, because in raids you're going to be dealing with mechanics thrown at you from enemies, and you're going to need to know your rotation instinctively to be able to handle both your own mechanics and the bosses. Don't just jump in there without knowing your class. Look up a guide and learn as much as you can. The third thing you should ask yourself is, am I old enough to be a raider? This is a very strange part of raiding, but it is important to note that most raid teams will be spending a lot of time together, and a lot of teams will be comprised of adults that want an environment where they can relax. A lot of adults will have children, so being able to step away from that aspect of their life and play games with other adults is an important factor of raiding to them. Young people, mostly between the ages of 11 and 17, are going to struggle to find a raiding team due to their age, and I'm afraid that there's very little in terms of advice I can offer. Don't lie about your age to try and get into a raiding guild or team, but instead try to find a team where age isn't an issue. Yes, this can be a bit difficult, but if you're quite the mature young player, then some guilds may accept an application even if you're younger than what they usually accept. Every team is different, so it's not really possible for me to tell you what will and won't work. Just remember to act thoughtfully and kindly in your dealings with others. The final thing you should ask yourself is, where am I going to begin? Raiding has three major modes: normal, heroic, and mythic. Normal mode is the easiest, offering a moderate challenge to players who aren't veterans or who don't have the time or desire to dedicate to the other modes. Heroic is the middle-of-the-road difficulty, offering a steep challenge to players and requiring a good bit of dedication, skill, tenacity, and coordination to defeat. And Mythic is the hardest difficulty, requiring a lot of dedication, pinpoint timing and skill, extreme levels of tenacity, and near-perfect coordination with team members to defeat. Consider raiding as a ladder, with normal mode near the bottom and Mythic near the top. If you want to become a Mythic mode raider, you can't just make a leap past dozens of bosses and the experience they provide and expect to land near the top with a solid footing. The best way to progress here is to, well, progress. Start at the bottom and make your way up, learning as you go. So, if you're new to raiding, forget about Mythic or even about Heroic mode for the time being. You need to go through the learning experience of being a normal mode raider before you can progress upwards. If you're a more experienced player, you can call upon that experience to start at different points on the ladder of progress. But in general, you're going to want to start at the bottom. Okay, so you've determined that you have the time and energy to raid, you're familiar enough with your class to raid, you're either old enough to raid, or you're confident enough in your maturity to give it a good shot, and you know where to begin. Now what do? Well, next you're going to want to prepare yourself for raiding. You'll need to understand what you're getting into and prepare yourself accordingly. To understand what you're getting into, you need to understand the mechanics of the enemies you'll be facing, what the bosses actually do. To do this, you need information. Now you can get a good dose of information about each boss using the dungeon journal, available from the micro menu or by opening up your map and clicking on the boss icons whilst inside the raid. This will provide a basic overview of the fight, telling you what mechanics the boss will use, complete with links you can mouse over to see the specifics of abilities. This will usually be enough for defeating normal mode bosses, but if you want to learn more, and you should want to learn more, then start looking up guides for boss fights. I'll include some links in the description to Wowhead's guides for Hellfire Citadel, the current endgame raid as of this video, alongside a link to Icy Veins guides, and video guides from Fat Boss TV, so you can learn about bosses. Just remember that experiencing the fight for yourself and figuring out how it works is always better than a guide. Yes, look up guides, learn about it, but don't enter the raid assuming that you're going to kill the bosses nice and easy. There is always a learning curve where you have to figure out the fight for yourself. When taking on a raid boss, your team is going to need to coordinate to execute a strategy, be it something as simple as prioritizing the killing of a certain type of enemy, throwing a powerful relic around to mitigate boss mechanics, spreading out or stacking together to help the healers deal with damage, and much, much more. Depending on the intensity of the fight and the team that you work with, your strategy is going to change. Right, so now you understand what you're getting into. You're researching the fights ahead of time so that you're prepared to fight them, and you understand that your team is going to be coming up with a strategy for success, and you'll have to work with them to pull it off. But what can you do to prepare yourself for all of this? Well, there are certain things that every raider is expected to do individually outside of raiding to increase their performance and, as such, make the team stronger so that they can defeat more bosses and get more loot. The first thing you're going to need to do is gear up. You want to be of an appropriate item level for the enemies you'll be facing. If you're undergeared for a fight, then you'll die faster since your health pool will be lower, you won't contribute as much damage or healing, and you'll be a detriment to your raid team. So, you have a responsibility to do whatever you can to improve your gear. Depending upon what gear you're in, you'll be able to do various things to improve it. If you've recently hit maximum level, consider doing some world quests and entry-level normal and heroic 5-man dungeons to start gearing up. If you've got some gear from dungeons and world quests, consider trying mythic dungeons to gear up even further. Run some looking for raids to gear up even more and see some of the bosses on their easiest difficulty. This will help you not only gear up, but to understand the layout of a raid and see what the bosses are like at their simplest. This is the first rung of the ladder, so don't skip out on it, a lot of players do. Complete quests that will increase your power, such as artifact quest chains in Legion, and constantly search for ways to improve your item level. On top of this, you're going to want to do everything you can to make sure that the gear you are using is the best it can be. You'll want to upgrade your gear using Valor, which, as of this video, is a means to improve your gear. Run your first heroic of the day, complete weekly events, and complete mythic dungeons to get Valor. You're also going to want to enchant and gem your gear. Again, you'll want to know what statistics are best for your class using a class guide on, say, Icy Veins or one of my own class guides. Make sure you're not wandering around with a piece of gear that's ungemmed and unenchanted. The only downside to gemming and enchanting your gear like this is that it can be quite expensive. Many guilds will help you out with this process, but until you find yourself a team, you will need to prepare all of this yourself. A raid team is going to look at you and think, they haven't really put in the effort to gem and enchant their gear. How do we know they're going to put in the effort when it comes to raiding? So you need to be prepared, and you need to have your gear the best it can be. You're also going to want to have the best self-buffs available for your character. These come in the form of flasks, food, and potions. Depending upon your class and spec, you'll either want a strength, stamina, agility, or intellect flask, which is an elixir that lasts for 1 hour, isn't cancelled by death, and is pretty much mandatory in a raiding environment. You'll also want food, again determined by what statistic is best for your class. This food needs to be the best available, which, at time of speaking, is the plus 125 stat food, such as sleeper sushi, salty squid rolls, pickled eels, buttered sturgeons, and jumbo sea dogs. Yeah, these foods are pretty much necessary for raiding, so get your cooking skill leveled up, make friends with a cook, lean on your guild if you have one, or go to the auction house. Potions are similar to flasks, except that they provide a much larger but short-lasting bonus to a stat, like intellect, strength, agility, or even bonus armor. They normally last between 20 and 25 seconds. Now, they are limited by a cooldown that only starts once you exit combat, so you'll be using 2 per fight. One right before the fight begins, so that you can trigger its cooldown, and then again mid-fight. These are powerful bonuses that will help you succeed, so they are required if you want to be the best that you can be. Again, go to the auction house, learn alchemy, make friends with an alchemist, or lean on your guild to get these. In general, one raid will see you consume 2 to 4 flasks, 10 to 40 pieces of food, and 20 to 60 potions. This varies greatly depending upon how long the raid is, how skilled your raid team is, what kind of content you're doing, but a safe bet is to have 5 flasks, 60 pieces of food, and 80 potions per raid. You can then restock as necessary. As a side note, remember to grab bonus roll coins every week, so that you get extra chances at loot as you gear up and do raids. Alright, so you're personally prepared for raiding. You have your gear as good as you can get it, and you're stocked with personal buffs. You've done some looking for raid to help gear up and learn the basic boss mechanics and layout of the raid. You've researched the fight so that you know what to expect, and you're prepared to work with your team to reach victory. Now what? Well, now you search for a guild. This can be extremely tough, as finding a guild that suits you can take a very long time, and you may find yourself going between guilds as you search for the group that fits you. I've only recently found a guild that I really feel fits me, and I've been playing this game for 10 damn years. But to start the process, you're going to want to start looking for guilds that are seeking raiders. Good places to find teams are through the World of Warcraft guild recruitment forums, available as a link in the description for both EU and US. You're going to want to have a look at Trade Chat, the pre-made group finder, and this one is especially important, through your friends. If you're friends with a raider that does content you're close to on the ladder of progress, ask them about their team. Ask if they're after more raiders. See about getting a link to their website. A lot of guilds have websites, but not all of them do. Do everything you can to start searching for guilds. So, what are you looking for in a guild? Well, first of all, you're going to want a guild that's doing the content that you're close to on the ladder of progress. You're also after an experienced leader or officer team. You'll want a guild that knows what it's doing. And how a guild's leader and officers run a team and a guild will be very important. So, try to avoid a group that's completely fresh or run by someone who is, for lack of a better word, an ass. You want consistency and reliability, just as guilds will want consistency and reliability from you. Check for a guild's raid times so that they mesh well with your schedule. And don't overdo the amount of raiding you do. 2 nights a week is a good start, but going to 3, 4, or even 5 is way over the top for your first foray into raiding, so take it slow. I'm in a mythic raid team that has defeated every single boss in the Hellfire Citadel, which at time of speaking is the most difficult content in the game, and we raid 2 nights a week. It's not a big deal. Raiding can be stressful, so don't overdo it. Make sure your gear is up to scratch for what the guild you're looking at will want to do, and do your best to examine what their community might be like. Remember, you'll be spending time with these people, so it's important that you get along with them. Don't be afraid to ask questions through forums or whispers. Most officers and guild leaders will be happy to discuss their guild with you, especially if they're after more raiders. If you have to apply via a website, then make sure you answer every question truthfully, and do your best to demonstrate your thoughtfulness and drive to learn. It's important to note here that guild and raid leaders are not looking for players who either vastly outgear the content they want to do, or are at exactly the skill level they want. They are looking for potential. Instead of saying something like, "I have no raiding experience," try saying, "While I don't have any experience raiding, I've been preparing using this resource and getting geared up as best I can, researching the fights and doing all I can to ready myself. I know my class very well, I know the mechanics of the raid, I've studied it on LFR, which is the main content that I can do right now. I have my flasks, my potions, my food, I'm fully enchanted and gemmed. I'm doing all I can to improve." Make sure to use proper spelling and grammar, capitalize and punctuate. Don't just spend 5 minutes writing an application. Go over it in detail and show that you give a damn. Spell check it, run it by a friend if they're willing to proofread it. Do everything you can to show the people you're applying to that you care, because they want people who care. Just remember, expect to be denied when you're starting off. It sucks, yes, but don't let this get you down, because chances are that groups that don't accept you are losing out on a thoughtful, skilled player with a ton of potential. Once you've found a guild, you'll be expected to show up on time for raiding on their nights, and don't be surprised if you're sat or benched, i.e. you're expected to wait outside the raid, on certain bosses. You'll make your way into the team slowly, get gear and experience, and start to become a raider. It's not a particularly easy transition, and sometimes you may find yourself in a guild who put in less effort than you do, which sucks. Don't be afraid to move on if you found a guild that you feel you'll fit better into and that will help achieve your goals. Don't try and float around without a guild. The choice is always yours, remember. Just remember that you're dealing with people, and people don't like being denied or left out to dry by selfishness. Never randomly leave a guild. Say goodbye. It's not difficult. We've had to deal with this a lot, as you can tell, because now I'm ranting about it. Don't just log on, leave the guild, and log off. Don't be afraid of leaving a guild. People are going to spite you if you just randomly leave, especially if you're a new recruit. They're going to think you're spineless. Just say, this isn't working out. I think I'm going to move on. That's it! That's literally all you have to say. Regardless, be thoughtful and communicate with others. Ask questions, always try to improve, offer advice if you have any, but never assume that you're 100% correct, because you can always improve. That will conclude this guide for getting into raiding. While it's not a complete 100%, this is absolutely everything you need to know to start from nothing and become a mythic raider, because it's a huge involved process that can take months or even years. Hopefully this video has helped you understand the process you need to go through to start on the ladder of progress. Once you're there and you're progressing, it can really become quite addictive and huge amounts of fun, which is why you're playing the game, right? If you have any questions, thoughts, comments, or suggestions for future videos, you can contact me using the links in the description, or you can just leave a comment. Thank you very much for watching, and I wish you the best of luck in the world of Warcraft.